All right. Should go ahead and start recording.
Okay, we'll start recording.
We are at 6:31 right now. 6:30 on one of them.
Yeah. All right, it didn't tell us that we're recording, but we are recording.
Okay, are you ready? Good evening. The June 24th, 2021 Whatcom County Planning Commission meeting is called to order. I'll call the roll.
Oh, your microphone is off.
Okay, is that one off?
This one is on.
Okay.
I'm not sure how well they'll hear you.
I should ask first, can you hear me okay? Okay, all right, very good. I'll call the roll. Please tell me if you're here. Robert Bartel.
Here.
Kelvin Barton, that's me. Atul Deshmani.
Here.
Jim Hansen.
Yes, what you see is not an illusion.
I'm not sure what I just heard there, but
Yes.
thank you. Stephen Jackson. Stephen Jackson here. Kimberly,
Here.
John Mayberry,
Here.
Natalie McClendon,
Here.
Dominic Masseri.
Here.
All right. Well, please join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Thank you. It's time now for department update. Director Personius, can you give us a update?
Hi, guys. Just real quick, next Tuesday at council, we're bringing forward what we think, or we hope, are the final draft Cherry Point regulations and amendments for both the development regulations and the comp plan. So we've got that scheduled for a committee of the whole on Tuesday afternoon. And if council is okay with those that final version, then we'll move forward with setting an agenda for public hearing later in July and for final adoption. So that looks to be coming to a close here pretty soon. And then also the mineral resource land amendments that you guys made recommendations on at your last meeting will also be introduced to council in the Natural Resources Committee on Tuesday morning. And so we'll initiate that conversation with the council on those issues. I think that's all I got for you guys, unless you guys have any questions for me.
Any questions for Mark? Okay. Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, I was just curious, what kind of talks are going on about us potentially meeting in person again?
I haven't heard anything from downtown. That's got to come out of the prosecuting attorney's office, and our civil deputy, Karen Frakes, kind of coordinates everything regarding the governor's orders on the Open Public Meetings Act and during COVID-19. So supposedly on or about July 1st, next week, the governor will be easing some of those restrictions, but exactly what or how that's going to lay out in terms of public meetings. I know the council met on it, I think, at their last meeting, and there was still enough uncertainty about things that they didn't really move forward on anything yet. So it's still kind of a wait and see mode.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mark? All right, thank you so much, Mark.
You guys have a good meeting. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
So now is the time for open public comment session. If there is anyone that would like to speak, this is a chance to speak about anything that is not on our agenda tonight, as we are going to have a work session and the public hearing. But if you'd like to raise your hand, you can. Sorry, I always have to look at this because I never log in by phone. *9 on your phone will raise your hand. And I am not seeing anyone that wishes to speak at the open public comment session.
There's one.
We have one now. Thank you. So, Todd McKellips, please go ahead, and to unmute, you can press *6. Should unmute your phone, but Todd, go ahead.
Hi, Honorable Council for Whatcom County. My name is Todd McKellips. I'm the Executive Director for the Washington Tiny House Association. Word has gotten out about this meeting and what you're intending to do tonight. I want to thank you to whoever worked on your proposals. I read through it all, including the mobile home changes that you're making. I really appreciate everything. There's a lot of hard work being done there. Wanted to attend the meeting to voice a few concerns. You guys did right with
Todd?
Yeah.
Can you hold just a moment? We
Yeah.
are going to have a public hearing on this in a little bit, and
Okay.
that would be a really great time for your comments. We would really like to hear
Okay,
those.
got it.
So if you, and I'm really glad you're here. So when we get there, we are going to be looking for you. So just raise your hand when we do open that public hearing. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else in attendees that would like to speak in our open session for public comment? Okay, we're not seeing any. So now is the time for commissioner comments. Any commissioners? Commissioner McClendon.
First question, because everybody else seems to have turned off their video. Is that true, or is it something wrong with my internet?
Sorry, you're breaking up just a little bit, so I'm not sure what you have.
I just have a very bad signal, so we're gonna try and have to drop off. I'll just keep talking and you can't hear me.
We're hearing a little bit of it, so go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to let you know the continuing progress of the Committee on Public Participation. We did get about 150 staff people responded to our question, and we're still mulling over what it tells us. But we're going to reword the questions and use some, more or less similar kinds of question and send out to the boards and commission. So as planning commissioners, you will get that. It'll go out after 4th of July. I don't know exactly when, sometime mid-July. And get some information about what people think their experience is on boards and commissions and what they have, their impressions of what other people think, being active members of the community. So there is right now.
Thank you. Appreciate you keeping us updated with that. Commissioner Hanson, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I just wanted to note that I have something came up with out-of-town guests, so I have to leave about 7:30. So if there's something we need to vote on close to that time, you might want to bear that in mind.
Okay. Thank you. And I apologize if this is a little bit of levity, but Commissioner Mayberry, what in the world are you sitting in?
This is my outdoor office.
Well, it looks very nice, and I almost wondered if it was a piece of farm equipment sitting in one of your outbuildings.
I'll give you a tour sometime. It's great.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any more commissioner comments? Okay. So let's move on then to approval of minutes for June 10th.
Oh, did I have that on there? This should be it.
Or, I'm sorry, I put it in. Do we not have it tonight? I apologize. We put it in and it's not supposed to be there. I'll mark that off. So now we're to our main topic tonight, Affordable Housing Code amendments. And there are several staff here. Cliff Strong will be presenting and he'll introduce the other staff members. Cliff, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I hope your evening's going well. And also online is waiting in the background in case there are questions is Amy Keenan, or one of our current planners, managers. So back in 2019, the legislature passed, oops, where'd my thing go? Sorry, I just lost my notes. There it is. Passed extended House Bill, Senate House Bill 5383, which amended the state law to allow and regulate tiny homes as a way to increase affordable housing options in the state. And from this, the council then docketed amending our zoning code to implement this bill and allow tiny homes in Whatcom County. Along with that, we also, PDS also had something on our books to change. And so we've lumped in with this because it's a way of increasing affordable housing options. And that's to allow duplexes in urban growth areas when developed to a planned unit development. So when I started looking into this tiny house issue, I had no idea what they actually are. I watched one of the Tiny Home Nation episodes on Netflix and did a lot of research on the internet. But I found that there's still not a lot of info out there yet, other than companies trying to sell kits or blueprints for them. And not many jurisdictions have developed code for them. But what I did find and was surprised about was that there are several different types of tiny homes based on the characteristics that they have. And that really comes down to what type of state or federal license or certification they can obtain, or whether they meet the International Residential Code, whether or not they're self-contained, meaning do they need to be connected to utilities to operate, and whether they have chassis and wheels. And all of these have to do with whether they're intended to be or can be used for long-term or short-term use, especially when we bring in the building code. There are other differences, like how much insulation they might have, or whether they have basic sanitary necessities, but these three characteristics seem to suffice for classifying them. And so to understand those differences, I created a matrix of the characteristics and found that they could be broken into the 4 types. And then I realized that each of these types corresponds to the 4 types of residential units we already allow and regulate. And that's the matrix that became table 1 in your staff report. But once I understood this, how to address the issue became pretty straightforward. Basically, I'm proposing to create new definitions for the 4 types of tiny homes and amending some existing definitions of our existing dwelling unit types to include their corresponding tiny home type. And with those new and amended definitions, I found that, there are site-built tiny homes, which are analogous to a standard site-built home. And those could be allowed wherever and under whatever circumstances and standards our regular site-built homes are allowed, either as a primary use or an accessory unit. Manufactured tiny homes, and these are built by companies, in a plant. They're analogous to standard mobile home or manufactured homes. And they'd be allowed wherever and under whatever circumstances a standard mobile home is allowed, such as a primary use, an ADU, or a mobile home park. And then there's the tiny homes on wheels, which I've broken out into 2, type 1 and type 2. So the type 1 that I've labeled is analogous to park model trailers, and they'd be allowed wherever and under whatever circumstances park model trailers are allowed. And that's either as temporary guest lodging or as in an RV park in a space designated for park models, meaning that they have utility hookups. And the type 2 tiny home on wheels, which are analogous to residential or recreational vehicles. And so they'd be allowed wherever and under whatever circumstances and standards the recreational vehicles are allowed, which is as temporary guest lodging or an RV park. So, you know, just amending those definitions would allow them. But I started digging into our mobile home and RV park standards. I realized, like most of our code, it's pretty antiquated. You know, the goal wasn't to repair those, you know, up to you know, and change those drastically. But I did realize that, you know, we could separate the two out because it was all in one section. Some of the rules in there applied to just mobile home parks, some just applied to RV parks, and some applied to both types. So I've just separated those out. So most of those amendments you see in there are just, you know, trying to separate those out. But I've also decided to identify the process by which a park can be permitted, either a binding site plan or a condominium, and that CC&Rs must be submitted and approved so we can ensure long-term maintenance and operations are dealt with properly. Apart from that, I've kept the rules that applied to both and separating the ones into their respective sections. So under the proposed regulations, then one could develop a mobile home park for mobile homes, manufactured tiny homes, or a mix of the two, and an RV park for RVs, tiny homes on wheels, or a mix of the two. And as you saw in the staff report, mobile home parks are allowed as a conditional use permit in resort commercial, urban residential mixed, and urban residential medium density districts. And RV parks are allowed as conditional use in the resort commercial, tourist commercial, and the Point Roberts Special District. I should note that, you know, some folks had expressed an interest in allowing tiny home villages in the county, and I kind of sympathetic to that, but I couldn't figure out a way to do that without having increased densities, which you all know we can't do while retaining our urban character, or our rural character. So I think that those would have to be relegated to cities, actually, where higher densities are allowed. So the second short set of amendments is to allow duplexes in the planned unit developments. And PUDs essentially are a way to create kind of master plan communities. And in exchange for doing that, they allow certain uses beyond those allowed in the underlying zoning. They can only be developed in urban growth areas. They have to have a certain minimum parcel size. They have additional standards for buffering, open space, circulation, all that kind of stuff that you do when you're doing master planning. They do allow for increased densities, and they allow for a relaxation of dimensional standards. Now, to get a PUD, you have to go through Planning Commission and the council, because we bend the rules in some places, but you know, we want more public scrutiny on doing that. But right now, PUDs only allow single family and multifamily, which seems kind of silly. It allows the two ends of the range of housing types, but it doesn't allow duplexes. So we thought that adding duplexes as an allowed use in PUDs would also help promote some affordable housing. Again, most of the amendments shown in that section are just cleaning up grammar. The only two policy changes really are where I've added duplexes to subsections 1 and 2. So in general, this is a pretty simple matter. I found, I thought it was going to be a lot harder, especially if I could figure out a way of allowing, tiny home villages places, but I just couldn't get there. So this is what we've come up with, and we're recommending that you approve this and recommend to council that they adopt it. I should also note that this did come from council, And I think it was last month, we took it back to the P&D committee. We wanted to make sure we're on track with what they wanted. And they approved, they didn't approve, but they nodded their heads that this was a good approach. So just letting you know that. Other than that, I have nothing more to add.
Commissioner Lund, go ahead.
Question for Cliff. I was just curious, while you were exploring adding duplexes, did you look at all like co-housing options? Or would that already be permissible in a PUD under kind of multifamily? It's under policy goal 3F, and so I was just curious.
What do you mean by co-housing?
I can think of an example. I believe it's either Donovan. There's a co-housing in Bellingham.
Like a co-op or something?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like duplex style buildings, but often they can share some common areas. So the kitchen might be shared. So in some ways they kind of meet more of a tiny home because there's shared communal spaces. I don't know. It's kind of a hybrid between a multifamily and a tiny home village, I guess.
I hadn't heard of them, so I haven't thought about that. But it sounds kind of like a cool idea.
Okay, thanks, Cliff.
Commissioner Hampton.
Oh, I guess I'm not muted. A couple questions. One is tiny homes something that's as a product? And if so, do we have to use a different term that's more inclusive? That's one question.
But before you go on, you cut out for a second, so there was a part of your question I didn't hear.
Yeah, this computer keeps wanting to show. I don't know who got in here. The gremlin got in. Anyway, so is tiny homes trademarked? In which case, do we not want to use that term for legislation?
No.
Okay. The other thing is, would tiny home village available in Lammerts? Way again?
Yeah, so if you recall in Lammerts, we can't go above the density or sizes of things that already existed at the time we created those things. In fact, one of the guys that, I don't know, he has the resort up in Glacier on the mountain, and he and I have been talking because he wanted to develop a tiny home village up there because he has so many seasonal employees that that he has to bus up from Bellingham every winter. And I for the life of me, I just couldn't figure out a way of getting beyond the type of densities that are already there. And a tiny home village by definition would be pretty dense because they only take up a few square feet each.
And the third thing is, wouldn't there be some confusion between tiny homes, which are actually temporary housing, and true affordable housing? So
not all tiny homes are temporary. So if you do the site, like the stick, the site built or a manufactured, those are rated for long-term permanent habitation. It's the other two that are rated just for temporary use, and they can't get the certifications for permanent residence because they're not insulated properly. They don't always have restrooms or sinks or anything like that. A lot of people, I think, are just going out and they're building things in their backyard, but there's no rules around them yet, other than International Residential Code.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the permitting requirements are to develop a mobile home or RV park.
So I think I mentioned that. Let me see. Back up here. Amy, and if you know off the top of your head, go for it. But I think both of them are CUPs, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe both of them do require conditional use permits. Amy Keenan, planning. I would also add to the co-housing question, planned unit developments, UDs, would allow a co-housing option. It gives us flexibility in permitting ownership and uses, and I think that would be something we could get through with the PUD.
Hey, I just got one little follow-up. I guess I'm assuming the reason that we're talking about this is to address or come up with a solution for the homeless issue that we've got going on, which is going to require additional densities. So I kind of look at this as maybe a starting point so that we can have some definitions as to what tiny homes are. But if we're not going to allow tiny home villages or additional mobile home parks that can support these tiny homes, additional tiny homes, I don't know, is there a expectation that the county will be looking for parcels that can be developed for additional mobile home parks or RV parks?
So Matt Ammett is working on a separate set of amendments for these temporary homeless shelters or encampments that would allow tiny homes to be used for the homeless. But again, those would be in the urban areas. Whether the council is working on purchasing property or something, I don't know. I know they're working closely with the city of Bellingham to try to solve that issue. But generally, if you have a large homeless population, you want them close to services and out in the rural areas that is not close to services. So, you know, by operational definition, they kind of have to be near where all the services are.
Commissioner McClendon.
So I'm wondering, first of all, residential lots in the county are allowed to have ADUs, right?
Yep.
Right?
In some zones, not all zones, but most.
Not all zones. So does the addition of the tiny home option actually increase the number of lots that could have an additional?
No, under these proposed rules, you could have an ADU where a tiny home as an ADU where ADUs are already allowed, or you can have a tiny home as both of them, you know, a site built one as a primary residence, even if that's what you wanted.
So this doesn't really increase the availability of lots that could have a secondary
It does not.
living quarters. No, okay. I mean, I realize that, and it may not necessarily be the expectation. I really appreciate this chart is exactly the way I think of things. And I appreciate it being laid out this way. And it makes it really clear that tiny homes are a part of the options, the mix. But I don't want people to think that this is suddenly expanding our the number of units, dwelling units that could be out on county-owned property.
Well, it doesn't increase it doesn't allow for increased densities.
Yeah.
But as I said, it allows wherever we allow ADUs, which is most of our zones, am I right, Amy? Yeah, most of our zones do allow ADUs and a primary use. Right. So it expands the the use of smaller ones, but tiny homes, but doesn't
Right.
increase densities. Try as I may, I wanted to be able to allow some of that stuff, but I just couldn't figure out a way of getting around that density limit we're under.
Right. I would suggest that let's get this in law, and it defines another type of housing option. But really what we need to do is educate people who own property in the zones that can have ADUs and about their options, because they're the ones who are going to be creating new housing through ADUs, whether it's a tiny home or some other option. That's all.
Commissioner Lund.
So I guess I guess just for my own clarification here, when I think of ADU, I think of an accessory dwelling unit in the home, in the primary residence. So like this is the grandma suite, or a separate entrance with a kitchen for renters in a single family home as an ADU. And then when I think of the tiny home, that falls under broadly the DADU, detached accessory dwelling units. Am I thinking of that incorrectly? That's generally how I've heard it referred to in the conversations in Bellingham.
ADUs can be either attached or detached, and I don't think we distinguish, do we, Amy?
We do. We allow attached ADUs in nearly all of our zones. And you don't need as big of a lot in order to do that, a parcel size. However, we allow detached ADUs in the rural zone, in the ag zone in some cases, and all rural residential. The detached ADUs have a minimum lot size of, in general, 4.5 acres. I would say, just because of the administrative use permits for accessory dwelling units generally come through me, nearly every accessory dwelling unit we see is detached. That is by far the preferred, at least in the county.
Commissioner Hanson.
Unmuted. Let me see if I understand this correctly. So we're not talking about increasing density, but we're creating some more flexible standards for creating these additional dwelling units to accommodate people who might not otherwise be able to afford to put a roof over their house. So far, am I following it correctly?
Either not afford or just prefer a small home. I mean, it seems to be all the rage with the millennials these days.
So let's say if we're trying to cut down on underhousing, homelessness, etc., if we make it more reasonable for someone to create an additional housing unit that they could then rent. I'm not talking about grandma anymore. Given the housing crunch, what guarantee do we have that those will actually be rented at a more modest rate just because it costs them less to produce?
We have no mechanism to.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Work with rent.
Commissioner McClendon.
And this doesn't directly relate to the proposal at hand, but I wanted to kind of clarify another issue that impacts a rural lot owner from adding an ADU, and that is that if you're on septic, you are limited by the number of bedrooms your septic is rated for. And take, for example, my property, we have a 3-bedroom house and we have a second-story space in our our business commercial building that could be an apartment, but it's not legal. We don't use it as an apartment, we use it as an office, but it could be and has been in the past clearly used as an apartment. But because we only have a septic for 3 bedrooms, legally, it can't be used. We would have to add another septic mound. We've got one of those up above ground things. One each for each bedroom. You can just add another one. But that's a big consideration, I think, for people to at least do it legally. I mean, I'm sure there are things done not legally. But, and I guess this would be something this is something that I've been thinking about, that I think rating septic systems based on the number of bedrooms is kind of arbitrary. I realize you got to pick something, but we've got 3 people in this house. We could legally easily put 6 people with the same amount of septic capacity, but we can't legally rent to a single person in the non-apartment because it's considered as another bedroom. So let's do the tiny home thing, and let's keep thinking about what are the impediments to this. Septic is one of them.
Any more questions here? I just want to say that Commissioner McClendon, I like your thought process. I know that right now in Chelan County, they've been talking about SPRs, and in essence, there are people that are retired, and then they are creating an SPR to help with the retirement income, but their kids are all grown, so they're taking their 3-bedroom house and making an SPR in part of the house and bringing more people in. Cliff, if we had the ability to rate, or say in the example that Commissioner McClendon was giving, where you can have an ADU, a tiny house that's not attached, but it's rated by the number of people on the property, that would be a good consideration.
Yeah, unfortunately, the rules about number of people per septic and everything are the health department's rules. So
Yeah.
they're not in PDS's rules. So you'd have to talk to them about potentially amending their rules. But my guess is their rules are based on state standards as well.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I'm thinking in terms of say someone wishes to do that, and there's a way of saying, all right, we're going to rate your home as a 2-bedroom, and you can't use that 3rd bedroom, but you can have an accessory dwelling unit attached. That in essence is your 3rd bedroom. Something like that would be good to look at, in my opinion. Commissioner Mayberry.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure on this, but you can't regulate how many people live in a house, can you?
Nope.
Because I would think that would be problematic. You have too many kids and you have to move. So, I mean, I understand on the, I guess, permitting for number of bedrooms and stuff, but yeah, I don't think you can regulate how many people you pack in your house.
Commissioner McClendon.
And that's really my point, is you could have easily 6 people comfortable in this house, but because of the way we rate septics, we could have 2 people in the house and not be allowed to have the ADU because it's a fourth bedroom.
Right, and
So-
I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure that the ratio they use, it's 1 point something people they assume per bedroom, that over the average, works for roughly how many people are going to be in a house over time. Sometimes, sometimes there might be a few more, sometimes a few less.
Cliff, there's no hands up right now, so I'll bring this up. And I don't get a lot, but when you're talking a rental house and you're involved with it being a HUD rental, HUD does not allow you to limit how many people per bedroom. They have a formula that they use based on the size of the bedrooms and the age of who's in there. And so you can have quite a bit more in a 2-bedroom than you normally would think of. And if you have, say, a family room and a living room, they can have even more that HUD will approve for a HUD rental. So they have a different formula too. And perhaps it's time we really look at our formula for what our septic system handles and how many people on a piece of property, that we bring it into line with HUD a little more. I think that would help a lot with affordable housing.
Well, and I'm not sure that they're not yet. I don't know the health department's rules. I really haven't studied those.
I think probably what I'm hearing from a few of the commissioners is, can we reach out to the health district and start talking or open this conversation up?
I could, yeah. I'll put it on my to-do list now.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for Cliff right now? Or Amy? Todd? Okay. We had our report from Cliff, and we are what comes as a work session, and I get the impression that we've been in a work session here. So and I see attendee has raised their hand. We're not quite ready for that yet. Commissioner McClendon, go ahead.
I was going to mention that we need to do a public hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, and so our order right now for this one is work session, and then we'll go into public hearing. And, was wondering if there any more discussion. So are we ready for public hearing? Everybody okay? Okay. So we're going to open the public hearing on the tiny home topic. And if you're on your phone, *9 will raise your hand, and *6 will unmute your microphone. So Todd, would you go ahead, please?
Hello, Honorable Council. Again, I'm surprised I'm talking first. Thank you for the time today. I am the Executive Director with the Washington Tiny House Association. I'm also the initial bill sponsor. I went and actually went to everybody and for 3 years, and finally got Hans Zeiger, Senator here in Puyallup, to sponsor the bill with us. And he basically has told me that it's my job to go to all these meetings and make sure everybody is following what we initially wanted. I'm an injured ex-sheriff deputy from Pierce County here. I also have a mom who lives in the fifth wheel right now and caregivers for the state. I'm the owner of Seattle Tiny Homes, which is a factory assembled structures factory for L&I. We actually self-certify through them, and we build basically RV models and park models to state building code. I also advised and helped build the website, consulted with them on what should be done as far as people building the tiny homes themselves. I'm not here to brag or anything. I'm just here to help you guys and support you. And I want to thank Cliff for his hard work exploring the very complex issue of tiny houses. Tiny houses obviously can be for homeless. There those little shelter sheds, and it's not to be confused, because that is not what we are advocating for. We definitely help with that, and I'm on the board of the Veterans Village here in Orting, Washington, on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs. But started it with mobile home parks, and it was extremely difficult to develop. But I'm all about permanent housing solutions, and I want to earlier, Councilwoman McClendon spoke about basically the different bedroom being added and all that kind of stuff, which obviously health is in charge of and stays for flow of RVs. It's more managed by flow than it is adding a bedroom when it comes to RVs. And tiny homes as well, according to the Senate Bill 5383, was managed to basically work in the category of describing this as permanent housing, but with an avoidance of calling it permanent housing if it's RV certified. We like that category because you can add a dump station to your septic and all that, and you could host an Airbnb, or you can host a mother-in-law unit, someone taking care of a loved one and that kind of stuff. But we wanted to bring up also the incinerator toilets are being used a lot more and more nowadays. And that's something to look at individually as well. Tiny houses provide more equity in housing and disturbs the land a lot less. You can have a tiny home on wetland areas and it'll actually preserve the land, and you're not damaging areas that can't be developed. But who else is providing home ownership from $50,000 to $150,000 for a new house? And that is tiny homes provide that category for folks. Mr. Cliff, you mentioned, self-contained and non-contained units. I build mostly non-contained. Not a lot of people want tanks and stuff like that added. But I'm here to, I would like to email you, Cliff, and kind of discuss the stuff with you outside as well. But long-term use is what we're asking for, but we need the freedom for people to be able to move their homes. Yeah. Sorry, I'm out of time.
No, 30 seconds.
Okay. So a lot of people want the tiny home. They want to live there for a year, be able to move it. The Senate Bill 53 describes a tiny home that you could place on and take the wheels off, skirt it permanently, have it assessed, all that kind of stuff. And that's great. But a lot of people want the freedom to move, including Zach Giffen, who lives in your county. I believe he's going to testify soon. He's on the Tiny House Nation show, and he's a great guy. And we're looking forward to having the ability to provide the freedom to people to live in the houses that they so choose. I worry about your RV code. Right now it says for non-commercial, maximum stay of recreational vehicles 120 days, basically 30 calendar days per year max. I'm okay with the temporary use category and calling it that, but we need to be able to let people live in it for 365 if possible and call that temporary. That's my suggestion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Todd. We appreciate that. Next, Gwen Howard, sorry.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Hold on, I'm on both the phone and the computer. So let me get that fired up. My name's Gwen Howitt. I'm a lifelong resident of Whatcom County here. So I've seen the progression of the housing situation here from the time when my parents bought 10 acres up off of Lake Whatcom for $40,000. And I grew up there to now the situation that we're in with many of my friends, family, and coworkers simply not being able to afford a house in Whatcom County. I'm also the CEO of Mount Baker Ski Area. And we now have 450 employees. And I have seen the progression in the East Whatcom County from what has happened in the Glacier, Maple Falls, Kendall area in terms of accessibility to housing for our workforce. And I'm deeply concerned about this. What I have seen is that we as a business strive to provide living wages for people. And we also host a workforce that is entering in as young people into the workforce, as well as supervisors who are in their 30s and 40s. And then we also host over 60 long-term year-round and staff members. And it's a struggle for me right now as the CEO to be able to provide enough benefit and wage for even our high-level employees to afford to stay in Whatcom County, let alone the over 300 people that come seasonally to support a business that is critical to the entire 542 corridor. I've been working for the last couple of years with various people, including Zach. And I want to thank Zach from Tiny House Nation. And Zach is a professional skier that came to Baker years ago from Colorado, and then now started the Tiny House Nation, or didn't know if he started it, but he's part of it, and has started this movement in Whatcom County, or a huge part of it. And he understands the need of not only our demographic from an economic standpoint, but also the desire of people to use less materials to create housing that is affordable and environmental and sustainable. And I can say that we have a direct need for our business for people who not only can be, as mentioned before by Todd, transient to some degree or flexible with their lifestyle, but also provide secure housing, but then also people who simply want to set up home in East County, but not use a lot of environmental materials, and also be established in the community. And what I have seen is in East Whatcom County, which none of us could have predicted really, I think, because of technology, is the impact of Airbnb and VRBOs. So what was our housing for our workforce is absolutely being taken up by VRBOs and Airbnbs. So one of my concerns.
I need to your time is up.
Okay. My time is totally up?
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
One last comment is that I encourage the detached units to have some flexibility in being able to be a bit closer than the current code, so that density can actually be created in a reasonable manner with tiny homes. Oftentimes that's a limitation.
Thank you so much. I don't see a name, but I see a phone number ending in 899. Go ahead. Yeah. You can press *6 to unmute your phone. Did we lose you there? Okay. Is there anyone else of our attendees that wish to speak at the public hearing? Yes. So I see Perry Eskridge. Go ahead.
Yes, Perry Eskridge from the Whatcom County Association of Realtors. I'm very excited about this provision. I think it will give some measured relief to the affordable housing issue that we have in the county right now. The issue that I want to point out, though, is something that I need to remind this planning commission about, which is the reason that we have a housing crisis in Whatcom County is because Bellingham refuses to do their planning correctly. During the last 2 comprehensive planning cycles, Bellingham has not added any appreciable land to their urban growth areas. Even though they have areas that are ready for development, the infrastructure is in place, much of that land remains outside now of the urban growth area and is not serviced because Bellingham refuses to extend services to those areas of the UGA. And at a time when Bellingham is finding immense pressure on the existing mobile home parks that are in their city, and they've actually imposed a moratorium to stop the redevelopment of those mobile home parks because there's such immense pressure on them. Now we're talking about moving mobile home parks out into the rural parts of the county at a time when we're also trying to limit our water resources that are being used in the county, and we're trying to be more careful with septic systems out in the county. So I just urge this council to, remember that the reason you're even addressing this issue is because the city of Bellingham has not done its job in planning for the population that is moving here. And I think that's just a sad commentary because there's so much pressure now on development that we're actually talking about placing tiny homes, mobile home parks that would house people that need to be near services and rely heavily on public transportation and what have you. And we're going to put them out in the rural parts of the county that is going to put immense pressure on our transportation systems, the roads and streets that are out there, and the infrastructure that is out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach? Griffin? Go ahead.
Here. As long as you guys can hear me, all right?
It's a little fuzzy, but go ahead.
Keep talking.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm out here on Lummi Island. I'm, a 20-year Whatcom County and co-host of Tiny House Nation. I'm currently the vice president of the Tiny House Industry Association and a board member of a nonprofit called Operation Tiny Home. And I'm obviously a very passionate advocate for tiny homes, and I just, like to, a couple things. One is that we're talking about the county, so we're talking about trying to think about density in a space that's already reserved by the Land Preservation Act of 1903. And what I would just like to point out is that the when that law was put in place, it could have never predicted.
Zach, I think we've lost you. Zach, I think we lost you there. Don't know if you can hear us, but we cannot hear anything that you are saying at the moment. But we appreciate you calling in. So, is there anyone else of the attendees that would like to talk? We still have Zach would like to talk, but we can't. Okay. Jesse Rasmussen, go ahead. And
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Cool. Well, first of all, thanks for letting me talk. I really appreciate it. And thanks for listening. There are a number of issues or things that I'd like to go over, but I know Zach got cut off. And I think at the end of the day, I think Cliff has done an excellent job putting together what's proposed at the moment. But I would recommend holding off on any decisions at this time until you've had a chance to talk to either Zach or the Tiny House Alliance and the Tiny House Industry Association. But there's a couple of other issues that Quinn brought up, that we're not just talking about homelessness versus ADU rentals. And that's what it seems to come down to. There is a number of people like her employees that come in the middle. And this is where we need to address public housing that's affordable for the population that lives here. And I find that extremely important. In addition to this, there's also ASTM, American Standards for Testing and Materials, standards that have just gone through, and you guys, I believe, have that information, and it's in the works to continue down the road and get approved. Some of the issue or some of the points that I'd like to make are the short-term option for tiny houses versus RVs. And there's a big difference between an RV, which is manufactured for recreational use, versus a tiny house, even a tiny house on wheels, that is usually used for more longer term use. And so I think it's a great idea to come up with some permitting regulations and zoning for all of those. But I don't know that you have all the information, and I want you to have the information, and I'd be glad to share those individuals or organizations with you to make an informed decision for the long-term housing crisis here in Whatcom County. Thank you.
Thank you. And Zach, I see that you're back. Can you hear us okay? We lost you there.
Yes, yes, I can. Thank you so much. Can you hear me at all?
Zach,
Okay.
We'll see how far we can get here.
Today. Yeah. Explaining exactly.
If you can hear me at all, I'll get really short. What I would like to just say is that I don't believe that tiny homes are just a solution for the so the constant I think it's very important. I'm too but I really think that
This is Star Trek.
Zach, I don't know if you can hear us or not, but we lost you again. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? The public hearing? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed. Commissioners, go ahead. Commissioner Hanson.
Oh, I was just wondering if either Todd or Gwen has amendments to the proposed language that they would come forth with. It's certainly over my head, but they seem to have specific reservations, and if we're going to do this, we should take any opportunity to make it the best ordinance or planning document we can.
Gwen or Todd?
Yeah. Todd, are you there? Or I'll go ahead and speak. Jim, thank you for that. Also, I didn't have time, but I wanted to thank Cliff and all of you for your consideration on this. This is a very important issue. And to Jesse's point, on one hand, I feel like, yeah, let's put the throttle on and let's go for it. But also let's be as complete as we can in the process now, because it will have immediate implications. And I would be more than willing, in conjunction with Zach. Zach and I are close working friends as well as coworkers, and I'd be willing to help in any way that I can. So I'm looking for your lead, I guess, in terms of I'm available for any individual or another hearing or another meeting, or if you have a direct proposal of me pushing, anyone putting other ideas forth to the commission, great. My biggest concern is I don't want to stall it, because the work that Cliff has done is excellent. And I think the most important thing, whether you're talking homelessness or, as Jesse mentioned, in our case, more accessible, affordable housing in our community, the most important thing is that we take a step.
And Todd, that question was addressed to you as well.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity again, Honorable Council. I really appreciate this topic. You guys are being really proactive. I mean, I've been consulting with other jurisdictions that aren't caught up, as well as Cliff's work there. He did a wonderful job. The only concern of mine is, and caveat to maybe some misinformation, is that my building, we're actually engineering to proper snow loads. With my company, we have to, on behalf of LNI, we have to actually submit LNI's engineering for trailers, the walls, the
God, I think we're losing you there.
The ceiling, the roof, and all. Hello?
Yes, you're breaking up.
Sorry about that. That's weird. I have really good internet compared to Zach. He's in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, up in the mountains. But can you hear me okay now? Am I clear to continue? Okay. Sorry about that. But yeah, we're building to IRC standards. We're giving people engineering. I know your mobile home use code, most of them have the availability to strip a VIN and actually permit the unit as a full-time residential unit. So we're actually planning for that. We actually build these units to be high efficient, but also be permitted in the end run if someone wants to actually do that. My concern is
We lost you again there, Todd. We're going to move on to another commissioner. Commissioner McClendon, go ahead.
Your RV code living.
Okay. I have a question for Cliff. Is there any doubt? I mean, I think there may be some agreement here that this is just a small step and we need to do a lot more. But the question that I have is there a downside to going ahead and moving this as is through with the expectation that we will be working on it, looking for other avenues that need to be fixed?
I can't think of one. This would still allow, more housing options. And if people have ideas for how to do that and still stay within the GMA's rules, we can amend it again. I mean, it's simple enough.
Okay.
Commissioner Lund.
I guess I'm kind of feeling like there was some pretty knowledgeable folks that didn't have the opportunity to fully comment tonight. And I would be willing to maybe wait just for one more work session to see if there's specific amendments that they would like to put forth for us to consider one more time before a vote. But if the rest of the commission feels like they want to vote on it tonight, that's fine too. But I would be interested in giving everyone an opportunity to fully participate.
Commissioner Mayberry.
Yeah, I definitely recognize and understand the comments made by the public here and what they'd like to push forward and do more, but I see those more as zoning issues. And I think that this is a good step in getting some definitions for tiny homes. We have a process for rezoning with the CUP. And I think this is a good first step. So I think we should just pass it tonight.
Commissioner McClendon.
I actually wanted a clarification on the comments made by Mr. Estridge about this pushing more mobile home parks in the county. There's nothing in here that does that, is there?
There is not. It just basically says that manufactured tiny homes would be able to be in any mobile home park when developed.
Just want to double check that. Thank you.
Commissioner Gasmani.
I would support passing it tonight as well. And the reason is because I also think that there's some urgency for getting this particular kind of dwelling under some kind of regulatory oversight. There's right now it's very ambiguous and potentially, obviously the folks that commented are conscientious, but there's some practices happening regarding tiny homes that could be exposing the public to unsafe housing. for that reason, I think steps in direction of as Commissioner Mabry said, creating some categories and definitions may be somewhat urgent and important to undertake.
Question for Cliff. Cliff, is it possible to add a line to this to require this to be come back and addressed, say, in 18 months?
I didn't hear that last part.
Yeah, I was wondering, I think everybody is agreeing that this is really necessary piece, and I think we're all agreeing that we're probably not going to put in everything that ultimately will be in it over time. Is it possible to add a clause that says it's going to be readdressed, say, in 18 months after passage if it passes? Is that a possibility?
It would be possible to include that in the ordinance that I would take to council. It wouldn't go in code per se. But you could also put it on your list that keeps growing now of things you would like to get to in the next year or so. I think Commissioner Lund was in charge of that, wasn't she? You made a couple of suggestions. I said, put it on your list. You say, okay, let's do it.
What we really want to do is put it on your list.
Well, I understand. My list comes from Mark. Mark's list comes from you and the council.
Okay.
Except when it comes to wind.
Again, take that up with the director, please.
I couldn't resist.
Commissioner Lund.
I can't remember who the attendee that made the comment, but he talked about an ATSM standard for materials. And I was just wondering if Cliff had seen that, because that kind of touched on Commissioner Desmani's point about safety and material choices for these.
Yeah, I think Todd was talking about that he manufactures some of these to certain standards and they get self-certified and everything, and that is built into here because manufactured homes and even the park model types do, you'll look in that table 1, I list the different certifications that one would get that corresponds to the thing. So my guess is he's building the manufactured tiny home that would fall in that category. But also when the council adopted the most recent IRC and all the building codes, they did that earlier this year. It included Appendix Q, which has the building code requirements for tiny homes. So I do believe we cover all those standards already.
Commissioner Bartel.
So I certainly agree with Commissioner Desmani that for safety alone today, I'd like to see it voted on in that it gets us going somewhere in the immediate sense. But the other thing that I was really curious about was the maximum length of stay in recreational vehicle parks shall not exceed 180 days for any 1-year time period. And looking at that, it would be 6 months of 1 year and then 6 months following right away after that, I suppose. So somebody could be there for a year. And as somebody mentioned during the public comment, is there really a purpose for this? Or, I imagine it'd be very hard to actually, make sure that people are moving in the proper time frame. So enforcement might be an issue. And I was wondering where it came from. Does it make sense to leave it in there at this 6 month or 180 days, or could we remove it? And what impact would that have?
So my only experience with it, I wasn't here when they adopted that rule, but it is throughout our code in all of the zones. I do have experience in the Point Roberts area because I go up there and work with their their advisory committee. And I know they've had a lot of, they've had a lot of complaints about people staying too long on a lot that wasn't intended for that kind of use, or, there's more people, more noise, that the neighbors complain about, that kind of stuff. So those rules were intended to allow you to have guests at your home for an extended period of time, but not forever. I guess there's even some lots where, they'll put 3 or 4 manufactured homes or something on it and, rent them out to folks, and it becomes kind of an illegal subdivision almost.
So just if I can follow up on that, am I following this correct? So only 180 days in 1 year is where somebody could have one of these vehicles on that lot. So it's not one vehicle for 180 days, then change to a different vehicle for another.
Right, correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gasmani.
So I'm just remembering what Commissioner Hanson said about his timing. I think some of the conversation here is follow on past a okay, he has to go now. Anyways, so follow on discussion about what the next steps are. I think I support the idea of an adaptive process and the ability to revisit these ordinances in the relatively near future. I also, I know this isn't the purview of the Planning Commission, but I have to say that these kinds of housing solutions that we're coming up with, it's important to think about the public health and safety needs of the community. This is one piece of many to improve public health and safety. It's important to look at these different categories, Cliff, from a health and safety perspective. I'm sure you've done your best to try to think about those going into it, but it'd be worth getting additional consulting on the purpose of the different housing options and risks that they pose to public health and safety, and also opportunities. Obviously, some housing is better than no housing. So anyway, so thinking that through, I just wanted to, I don't know what's going on in that regard, but I think it's important that that be addressed and be used to input future updates to the codes. And lastly, humorously, it's good to know that there's a county ordinance that I could have used to get rid of my brother-in-law when he was staying too long. It's too late now, though.
Commissioner Hanson.
I do have to go. If do we have a quorum right now? And if we have will we lose it if I go? And if so, do we have a motion, a second, or just put it off to the next meeting? Or what's?
We do have a quorum if you go.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Keep up the good work. Take care.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Commissioner McClendon.
So I know there was some concern about the 180-day limit for recreational vehicles or type 2 tiny homes on wheels. Seem to be the only difference between a type 1 and a type 2 tiny home on wheels is type 2 is self-contained. Whereas type 1 requires a hookup.
Right.
Is that correct?
Double check my notes here, but I'm also having a small conversation with Todd on the side. He hasn't been able to get back on, but we're emailing back and forth. So let me.
Otherwise, in this chart, it looks pretty much the same. It's just the self-containment.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to that chart. I've just got too many things open up here.
And the licensing, which is.
Yeah, so neither meets IRC, none or HUD certified, but they can be LNI certified and DOL licensed. Yeah, the type 2 is self-contained, meaning they can be used, you'd have to move them to empty your septic and all that kind of stuff. But if it's not self-contained, it has to be hooked up to a connection.
Right. So is there, I'm not actually familiar with the term park model. I assume that what you're talking about there is just what we think of as a trailer park.
No, a park model is a specific type of manufactured home that's built to lesser standards than a manufactured home. So it doesn't have the insulation and the other health safety stuff that's necessary. So they're intended to be just short-term rent or short-term units.
Is there, in our zoning, is there a limit of days on a park model or type 1 tiny home on wheels? Or is it just in the recreational vehicle category?
So yeah, it's just the RV type. So the park model or RVs are limited because again, they don't. We don't want somebody hooking up illegally, to an illegal connection for sewer or water where they weren't allowed. We want them to be able to empty their stuff. Ask your question once more because I may have gone sideways on you.
Okay. All right, that's what I wanted to know. So, So in the park model and type 1 tiny home category, even though it says short term, there's no time limit.
So if you're in a yeah, so those are that's meaning that it's intended. So the question, the criteria is intended or licensed for long term or short term. So they're intended or licensed for short term because they're not built.
What meaning does that have if it's the wheels have been taken off and it's hooked up to utilities?
Right, but they still don't have the same level of insulation or facilities, restrooms, things like that, that a unit that's designed for long-term habitation would have. So it doesn't meet all the same building codes or manufacturing codes.
Okay, okay. But is there any time limit like there is in the recreational vehicle category for the park model?
So if you're in a like an RV park or a and those so that 180 days is just for when you're using or when you're visiting somebody or putting it on as an ADU. If it's in a RV park or a mobile home park, they could be hooked up and thus have, be used longer term, theoretically. But again, they don't meet all the building criteria for long-term habitation. And so the building official.
But the 180 days doesn't apply?
Not
Is that what you're saying? The 180 days doesn't apply?
Not to mobile home parks. It does apply to the RV parks, I believe. And correct me if I'm wrong, Amy. I see you listening intently there.
Maybe I can help a little bit and just try to, there's a lot of things that are sort of our terms that are thrown out here, but in general, the park models that we see are in our recreational vehicle parks. So you think Birch Bay area, and in a lot of cases, they're very small. Also, park models are
400 square feet.
400 square feet. So they're sort of, if you were to think of a tiny home, you probably would think sort of a park model. Park models are, again, though, are not permitted from a building code for year-round habitation. So we see them in our RV parks, and our RV parks in general do actually have 180-day allotments, and they allow people to stay in them 180 days and not exceed the 180 days. I don't know how and not, probably not all of them, and I don't know about the enforcement on that, but a lot of the mobile home parks and RV parks do have stipulations on timing. So we don't, and this would be a building permit question, and I'm not 100% on this, but I don't believe that we allow park models to be placed on sites as like an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit that's permanent, because that accessory dwelling unit is designed for permanent year-round occupation. So I think that's kind of the difference. The park model, usually in our RV parks, we don't allow them, I don't believe, as permanent accessory dwelling units. They're only temporary.
Yeah, because RV parks were supposed to be for recreational use, people going up to the mountains, things like that, or going to the beach. They weren't intended to be lived in.
Okay, I'm still a little confused, but.
Even with the chart you love?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the amount of time you're allowed to stay in an RV park is because it's supposed to be recreational, not primary residence. So that's why we have the difference between RV parks and mobile home parks. Mobile home parks are your primary residence. You stay there all year long. RV parks are supposed to be for recreation. So that's why there's the 180-day maximum, as well as the different lesser requirements for the building codes. So it makes sense to limit the maximum stay.
Commissioner Lund.
I'm feeling like I'm ready to accept the amendments and finding of facts if there isn't more discussion. I would make a motion if if that's the temperature.
Hand raise.
I'll second.
Well, no, I have a point before you move on. Because I just got a text from Mark. He asked me to let you know that we would be happy to engage with the tiny home stakeholders before bringing the PC recommendation to the council for final review, hearing, and adoption. And I already have spoken with Gwen and Zach. I haven't talked to Todd before, and he's been emailing me just now. And so we made a connection. I suggested maybe we can talk next week. But even if you pass this tonight, we can work with them to see if there's anything else that might be better in here.
So I would like to make a motion that we accept these amendments and finding of fact. And with the understanding that staff may be working with some additional outside information before they bring this forth to the county council.
I'll second that.
Second.
Have a motion to bring this forth with the caveat that staff will be working with some of the tiny house advocates. Have a motion and second. Is there discussion? No discussion. Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Desmani,
Yes.
Commissioner Lund,
Yes.
Commissioner Mayberry,
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon,
Yes.
Commissioner Masseri,
Yes.
Mr. Barton.
Yes.
Okay, that is 7 yeses and no nays, so that carries.
So we have one thing left, that would be unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business? Anything else at all? Seeing none, we'll adjourn the meeting. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
See you guys.
I hope your
Stay
I hope your
cool.
berries don't get too hot, John.
Yeah, stay cool, man.
Be fine.
Thank you, attendees.